guys, welcome to Daily Covfefe with Carter and Carrie on Unsafe Space. Today is Wednesday, July 10th, and we have a lot to talk about, don't we, Carter? Or something to talk about. Something that's made me very upset.
We have some things to talk about, yes. Carrie, I was thinking, I didn't check in with you about this before the show. I was thinking, we have limited time, and I've been really thinking about what, you and I have been having talks strategically about what we want to be doing. And I realized maybe we should ask you guys. We have a small but very supportive group of followers right now on YouTube. And what kind of content do you want to see from, tell us in the notes, what kind of content do you want to see from us? Daily Covfefe has generally been more fun, kind of. I mean, we're not comedians, but it's kind of more relaxed and fun about the current news. But then there's stuff that's more in depth, like conversations with Dr. Rachel Brown, that kind of stuff. I tend to like the in-depth stuff, but I'd like to know what everyone wants to see more of.
I know what I want to see.
What do you want to see more of?
Well, I want us to be able to do comedy content.
That would be great.
I want us to do. I'm like some of these sketch ideas and stuff. I have a well, whatever. You guys tell us what you want to see. Okay.
I want to see the comedy stuff too. So yes, I just wanted to point that out. Carrie, there's something that has gotten you fired up today.
Well, just continuing the conversation we keep having about social media, the purge, the censorship that's ongoing. And, we're going to continue to see this ramping up leading up to the election. But what just happened, I think, is one of the most egregious things yet, which is, you guys may remember previously that Facebook banned a number of dangerous individuals they call dangerous, including Milo Yiannopoulos, Paul Joseph Watson, which Paul Joseph Watson is suing. And I hope there's nothing he has said that they can even point to as hate speech, and yet they call him a dangerous individual. Laura Loomer was on that list, Alex Jones, Louis Farrakhan. I'm probably leaving someone off. Anyway, they came out with a new policy. I'm going to share this screen. So now that they've done that, now that they've declared these individuals to be dangerous,
yep,
this is a new thing they just put out. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yeah, so
yeah, this is a post that says in their community standards section, do not post threats that could lead to death. Now, and then skip on down, because I just want to read the important part first. Unless the target is an organization or individual covered in the Dangerous Individuals and Organizations policy. Wow.
Or is described as having carried out violent crimes or sexual offenses, wherein their criminal perpetrator status has been established by media reports, market knowledge, news event, etc.
Yeah, but just focus on that first part for a second. Unless the target's an organization or individual covered in the Dangerous Individuals and Organizations policy. Well, all of those people we just mentioned are in that policy. They've officially declared them dangerous. So you can post death threats, quote, and other forms of high severity violence.
Yeah, it looks like you can, Carrie.
You can post, quote, statements of intent to commit high severity violence or calls for high severity violence, as long as the target is an organization or individual that they've put in their Dangerous Individuals and that's illegal. Okay, free speech does not include calls to violence.
Well, so
right,
this free speech, right? It does if it's not credible. Like if you make a general statement like, we should kill everyone who wears red socks.
Right.
But if it's specific and credible and there's reason to believe that you mean it and can carry it out, then it is violence, because it's introducing real violence into a relationship that didn't exist before. And,
right. And I how about just the standard policy of do not post death threats against anyone?
Well, they can't have that, Carrie. Antifa needs to be able to have death threats against Paul Joseph Watson. I don't understand.
What could go wrong with this? Death threats are cool against this one class of people that Facebook is creating.
Now, interestingly enough, they haven't banned, like, they don't consider Antifa a dangerous group, I assume.
Correct. Or ISIS.
Or ISIS. They must consider ISIS, no?
Well, I know ISIS is still on Twitter. I'm not sure about Facebook, but there are several of these social media companies that have not banned Antifa or ISIS.
Wow. Well, yeah, this is, I think we are going to see more of this ramping up towards the election. I know the media summit is coming up. I think it's Thursday. I think it's tomorrow, right? Tim Pool was invited to the White House, which is great.
That's
So he
great.
can go and have this. My concern is that it's going to end up in like Trump deciding to regulate some social media stuff, but still, at least it does need to be talked about, and people need to be aware that this is happening. I agree with you. I don't know. I mean, they want to be able to threaten people they don't like. I mean,
They want to be able to threaten. I want to
yeah.
share one more thing just to give credit on where the first person I saw talking about this was Mark Kern. I mean, I've since seen other people discussing it, but he's got this tweet where he says Facebook issues new policy, bans death threats or statement that could lead to violence or death. Great. Facebook, unless ... mumble. Wait, Facebook, like violence and death threats against Nazis are okay? Facebook, yeah. Well, who's a Nazi? Facebook, whoever the media tells us.
Right. That is the policy, though. That's a great summation, Carrie.
Yeah. And I Laura Loomer, who's on that list, she just filed a $3 billion defamation lawsuit against Facebook. And
Good.
I hope she takes them to the cleaners.
Well, there's been some interesting things. So a court just ruled, for example, that Trump can't block people on social media because he uses it as a public official to communicate. Now, this has interesting repercussions for some of these other lawsuits, like Laura Loomer's lawsuit, because if Trump can't block people because he uses it to communicate to the public, then you could argue that the public can't be blocked from the platform because they need access to the official who is.
Exactly.
So it's an interesting precedent to set. And I don't necessarily agree with the precedent, but that precedent has been set. And so that actually could have ramifications for these lawsuits from people like Laura Loomer. And I think, isn't Gavin McInnes also suing?
I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be surprised. He should be. They all should be.
The other thing that, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say related to that law, the decision about Trump not being able to block anyone on Twitter. There's someone said, okay, game on. They're suing AOC now for blocking
Of course.
people on Twitter.
Right. AOC still has not disavowed the violent threats against Mini AOC and her family that drove them off of social media platforms. Just FYI, notice the media doesn't ask her to disavow anything. But of course, anyone who's not on the far left, the media every day is like, will you disavow David Duke? Will you disavow this crazy person who supports you? Will you disavow that person? But AOC doesn't have to disavow anything because,
It's so biased. I was looking for news articles this morning. It's such a double standard. I was trying to find an article about the Laura Loomer lawsuit, and all I was finding were, conservative outlets talking about it. And I was looking for a quote legacy media outlet, and the only ones I found in the headline says far right activist Laura Loomer. Just the way they framed the headlines, even, it's such a double standard.
Yeah. And the worst part of that policy, or all bad, but the part that I think is really pernicious is Facebook. They say unless they're on this list, but that list, like this tweet guide said, that list is really very subjective because not only is it a vague term, dangerous individuals, but they rely on whoever they call mainstream media. So if they don't like Breitbart doesn't get classified as a legitimate news organization. So if they call Antifa dangerous or hate group or whatever, they will be ignored. Only the media that Facebook likes. And so basically what Facebook will do is they will end up just only green lighting, only whitelisting the media that they like, that they agree with. And, Tim Pool pointed this out actually the other day. And I agree with him about this, having worked in Silicon Valley for 20 years. They don't view themselves as biased. They think that, he was saying that, they look at the far left and people on the, like Joe Biden as kind of on the right. And so they think that they're in the middle. I don't think that's how they look at it. Silicon Valley is very smug and views themselves as scientific and smarter than everyone else. That's been true in Silicon Valley for quite some time. So to them, this makes them very, very good at rationalizing their political and philosophical viewpoint with cherry-picked data or just rationalized arguments that ignore counter arguments and that kind of thing. And because they're very full of themselves and think that they're smarter than everyone else, then what they do is they take that and they say, well, we're not biased because our position is just objectively right. It's just objectively true that there are more genders. That's not a biased position. It's not, sex is a social construct. That's not biased. That's just true. And it's scientific, right?
And we know because we're the smartest.
Right. We know because we're the smart people. And so the proletariat is just, they're stupid and they're idiots. And we're not being biased. We're just, these idiots just don't know. It's like they view everyone else as like flat earthers, right? So you don't have to listen to the flat earthers. The earth that's to them, it's the same thing, right? When a conservative or even a non-conservative scientist says, actually, sex is biological and falls into two categories, that to them, that sounds like someone saying the earth is flat. They just can dismiss them because they're idiots and old in Silicon Valley.
But right. The proof is in the pudding. They're not smarter than if they were smarter, they would be able to objectively stand back and look at where they're at and consider another point of view, and they would be to more objectively self-evaluate. They're incapable of self-evaluating. They can't do it.
I'm not saying they are.
No, I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying I'm calling them out. Of course they're not, but they think they are. It's like the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? They think they're smarter than everyone else.
Although someone corrected us on the use of it, and I have the paper queued up. I'm going to read. Their argument was Dunning-Kruger was more about skill. I thought it was about intelligence in a particular area, which actually does correlate to G, which is raw intelligence. I'll read the paper, but it's at least of that vein of this idea that.
Well, it could be related to skill, but the point is people who are like average or maybe slightly above average often inflate. Like if you ask them to analyze their own intelligence, they overestimate, but they underestimate for other people. Isn't that correct? And then people of high, like those people who are way out on the high end, those outliers, they underestimate their own intelligence, but they're pretty good at predicting the intelligence of people around them.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not familiar with that study, but I believe you.
Okay.
But the Silicon Valley, I mean, part of it is they've been told by everyone that they're geniuses, right? And some of them are very smart in particular areas.
Yes.
But being a great programmer or even a great business person doesn't mean that you're equally superior in every aspect of intelligence, and at every argument you make is better. So,
or morally superior, which is wrapped up in it too.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like moving to morality or other things. There are people. In fact, I know some extremely I know people who are probably, the handful of the top cryptographers in the world. I know some really smart people, smarter than me by far in Silicon Valley. But step outside of their area of expertise, they actually aren't that great, and the better ones know it. And so
yes,
like, well, I don't know, I haven't studied that, it seems to me this way, but I'm open to arguments. The slightly not as good ones just assume, well, I've been smarter than everyone that I hang out with normally. So I assume that I'm just smarter than everyone and I must be right about everything I speak must be correct. And obviously that's dangerous kind of
I
narcissism.
just I just think about some of the like the engineering geniuses at the science and math school I went to, who they, yes, highly specialized in one area, but then not able to, even social intelligence, right? Like social interactions and stuff, maybe lacking in that. I mean, that's an obvious one you can point to as an example of what we're talking about. People who are really highly intelligent and focused, lacking that. And actually, studies have shown that men who are more, the men who are those outliers, who are exceptionally brilliant and talented in one area, it's usually focused to one area more so than the women who are outliers.
Yeah, I mean that's not surprising. But and it is, I don't want to say anything that I think is scientifically inaccurate. Specialized intelligence, like if you're smart enough to be a physics genius, that is correlated to G. So you probably are generally much smarter than other people. That may be true, but brains is just like, that's just like an engine that goes really fast. If you don't have the map and the maintenance of that engine in a particular area, it doesn't mean you're right. So actually be brilliant, but if you haven't actually put in the time to become an expert in foreign policy, your foreign policy advice is not going to be better than someone who's actually not quite as smart as you, but knows the context and has spent a lot more time thinking it through because you've been stuck in your physics lab or whatever it is. So intelligence is important, but uh, it's not an automatic pass that means you're correct at everything. You still need to combine it with actual learning and thought and experience and knowledge about a particular field, which is why even some of these really brilliant people, it takes them years and years and years to build companies or make breakthroughs or do things, significant in science and technology, because they've got to learn all of the relevant information in that field. And the same applies for other fields. And like I said, the smart ones know it. The smart ones look at other fields and go, well, I didn't spend 10 years studying that. So even
Yeah.
though I'm smart, I'm going to speak with a little bit of hesitation about it.
I'm thinking of some of the people I know who've worked for Google, and some of the people, like just the arrogance you're talking about, just anecdotally. Um, and one of them in particular became a huge SJW after the election. And the arrogance that was always there, it's like it transformed into SJW arrogance as well. Like there was this arrogance of like, I am one of the smartest people ever. And I would say this person's reproductive strategy was a bit of an arrogant. It's just like following a blueprint of how to act like an alpha guy. And
Right.
then as soon as SJW stuff became the norm, then it was like, oh well, now I'm the biggest. Now my blueprint for reproductive success is to be the biggest SJW ever,
Right.
because it's a weird. Anyway, that's just anecdotally, but you're making me think of.
No, you're right. And this is something that I've thought about. I've thought about Silicon Valley in this way a lot. I don't have firm conclusions, so I don't want to put out any, you know, statements that I'm saying like this is what's happening definitely. But there is something wrong with the markets. Like everything's so intertwined and related sometimes. Like the markets are weirdly distorted because of regulation and a whole bunch of other stuff. And what you've ended up with, I think I might have mentioned this in the past, but in the past, when you started a company in Silicon Valley, what mattered was um, people's estimation to get capital, to get venture money. What mattered was their estimation of, are you actually building a product that will be viable? Will this be profitable? Are you building a real company that we think there's real potential to make money back? That has gone away, and it's rational that it's gone away. A lot of VCs don't look at that anymore, and the reason they don't look at that is because the public markets have gotten hyped up about tech companies. And remember, the venture capitalists, they just want an exit. So in the past, the exit came from, oh, well, once you got to be profitable and demonstrated you build a real company, then you could go public, and that's when the VC would get their exit and they would get their return. But the public markets are taking these companies, they're IPOing companies that have, I mean, Snapchat's a great example. Like totally inverted balance sheets, right? Totally inverted, cash flow statements, just bleeding money. But big market caps, the public markets accept those companies, and venture capitalists go, well, I'm not going to evaluate whether a company is building a good company anymore. I'm going to evaluate whether they're building something that can be pawned off onto the public markets. Because if they can, that's enough for me to invest and give my returns to my LPs. That's how that works. So there's been this shift in investing in Silicon Valley, which has been like, just invest in stuff. If hype is enough, if you can sell hype all the way through to the public markets or to Google buying you, then hype is value, and you can invest in hype. And I think that's happened to a large extent. And a lot of people in Silicon Valley, look, a lot of people deserve their money. They've worked hard. They're geniuses. They've built really important things. I'm not taking that away. But there are a lot of people in Silicon Valley that have equated financial success with some sort of moral superiority and brilliance. And because they conflate those two things, and we're in a very frothy market with respect to tech companies, and you can build something like Snapchat and make millions and millions of dollars even if you weren't a founder. You can make tens of millions of dollars even if you weren't a founder, just by being around early, building something that ultimately has zero value or negative value, but lasts long enough to be sold to people on the public markets who think that they need to be involved in the next greatest thing. And so you end up with this whole class of people. There's so many millionaires here. You end up with this whole class of people who conflate this success with their brilliance, and it's not even real success in like fundamentally they haven't actually even built anything valuable. They're just exploiting the system, and some of them aren't even the ones actively exploiting it. Some of them are just hired early to someone who's exploiting the system, and they're kind of, I don't want to say they've lucked into it, because often they do work hard. I'm not saying it's all luck, but they have this inflated view of themselves as some, intrepid robber baron, when really they're like they're a JavaScript engineer who was hire number 10 at a company that's never actually turned a profit. But they've got a Bugatti in their garage because they are early.
Yes. It's this elite class. It makes me think of to take it back to, I know we've mentioned this in another episode, but it's not a spoiler at this point, guys. It's been out for a while. In Game of Thrones, like the second to last episode, where Dany is basically justifying making a decision to murder all of these innocent people because she knows what's best. She knows what's good. I know what's good.
Right.
Like, and
they really believe it, though. They really believe it. They believe they know what's good.
Yeah, they do. They know better than us. That it also. Wait, what were you saying?
No, I'm just saying Mark Zuckerberg really thinks he knows best.
Yeah, he does. I'm sure those kind of people terrify me. They don't question their own goodness. They believe they're good people. Like, this is why you and I get into this thing about good and evil sometimes, because like I think it's very important to know I am not a good person. Like, I am not an evil person. I'm not a good person, but I can be capable of both. And that, I think Jordan Peterson was one of the first who made me.
I think you're a good person. So even though you won't call people evil, I will call you good as well as calling them evil. I think you're a good person.
Yeah, I think that's dangerous, though, if we start to believe that,
Sure. It doesn't mean you will always do good things, Carrie.
Yeah. But yeah, those people, they believe we're in the right side of history. We're good people. We're the good guys. Like, that's how Antifa does with it. We're the good guys. We can beat people in the head with, bricks or whatever. We can, because we're the good guys. Bike locks. It's in the name of goodness. It is like that C.S. Lewis quote about the tyranny that's exercised sincerely for the good of its victims is the one that's the scariest. I keep thinking about that lately.
No, great quote. And just as an aside, I think this is a consequence partly of being in a society where, if you're in a society in which you don't recognize the initiation of force as bad always in all cases, then anyone can justify the initiation of force by claiming to be the good. And so I actually think it's not much of a stretch from an oppressive right-wing police state to Antifa. They're the same thing, right? So if
Yeah.
you're support the police state initiation of violence, government does everything and controls everything tactics, then you also support Antifa. It's the same in principle. You can't criticize Antifa because they're just saying, well, you're giving legitimacy to the police states to do things that you think are good. Why can't we have that legitimacy? Do we think these things are good? So we're going to hit people over the head with rocks or whatever. And so there's really not, philosophically, if you are going to let go of the idea that the initiation of force is wrong, it is a slippery slope, and that's not a fallacy. It is a slippery slope, and you end up with not much of a philosophical argument against Antifa when you do that.
It's the same thing with this Facebook thing, to bring
Yeah.
it full circle. They if you believe that death threats are okay against certain people, it's the same slippery slope. It's like,
Yep.
how do you stop? Who do you stop putting in that group that it's okay to threaten with death?
Yeah,
These,
and if it's okay to threaten them, Carrie, is it okay to do anything?
yeah,
Like, are there people, is it okay to gas certain people, Mark
right.
Zuckerberg? Is that okay? What if
Great.
they're dangerous?
Yeah, great point. These people terrify me.
Yeah.
Some
By the
somebody
way,
some SJW on my wall yesterday was writing about right-wing authoritarianism and Trump, and I'm just like, what world are you living in? What world are you living in? The authoritarianism around us right now at this moment is coming from my side. It's coming from the left. It's coming from our side. You were into this false. It, it, I hate to bring it back, the red pill and the matrix stuff, but you were in this false reality. You're believing the entire game, the whole thing they're selling you. You're in it, and you're playing that game. You're reading that news. You're reading that media. You're brainwashed. Like, I get frustrated. I'm like, and I have to talk to you and pretend like we're in that world that you think we're in.
you don't have to. Yeah, I do oppose the people on the right who want a police state. I will oppose all of those things that you're afraid of also, but you've got to oppose Antifa. You've got to be against it universally. You can't pick and choose. And right
Exactly.
now, I don't have to yell about police state people on the right so much because that's not where culture's going. That's not who's, like, yes, Trump is president, but that's not really who's in charge still. Who's in charge of the conversation is not the Trump people. It's not police state people. And by the way, Trump, I don't think, is any more police state than other presidents. But it's not. Those aren't the people that are actually in charge of the conversation we're having right now. It's the media. It's the culture. It's cultural institutions like universities and Hollywood and the media and these huge institutions, government institutions, and people. Like, it's that whole network of what I guess we call the cathedral, right? They're in charge still of the conversation. The cathedral's in charge. And
The people who think they're good and smarter than us.
yeah, and they are supporting Antifa. And so if they want to come out against Antifa, I'll jump on the bandwagon of also criticizing whatever else they want to criticize about police state tactics. But the truth is that police state tactics aren't the immediate threat. They could be a threat in response to some of this crap. But that's only because you guys are pushing this Antifa crap.
They can't see that far either because they don't even see what the real world is that we're in. And I what you're saying exactly. I've thought about that. It's like you are pushing this authoritarianism on the left, and you don't expect there to be an equal and opposite reaction at some point on the right. Like, you're creating the very thing that you think is out there that's a threat. That's not a threat right now, but it could potentially be at some point because your inability to denounce things like Antifa, your inability to denounce things like censorship, even if people you don't like.
Related to this, because kind of you talked about earlier, this gearing up more and more. There'll be more and more of this stuff from social media companies leading up to the election, right? Trying to control the narrative. One thing that I saw a couple times, and I spent a little time looking at this on Wikipedia. okay, let's back up. Alex Jones banned. Why? Crazy conspiracy. He's a conspiracy theorist. Alex Jones is a conspiracy theorist. By the way, probably talked about Epstein while everyone was calling him a crazy conspiracy theorist, right? Talked about Epstein and Clinton and everything else. Fine. Okay, we ban him. Horrible. It's not a conspiracy if there's evidence that things are actually happening. And I want to point to something. Gary, you brought up the Facebook, like clearly trying to control the narrative. That's not a conspiracy. That's what's happening, right? Wikipedia. Go on Jeffrey Epstein's Wikipedia page.
Oh, I
And
saw this.
look at the history. It's, updated kind of regularly every day or so, maybe not quite. There's gaps of a couple weeks here and there, right up until recently. And at which point there's 50 edits a day or whatever it is. And what's happening on Wikipedia is a battle between people who are trying to massage the narrative. So little things like originally the entry said he was born to a Jewish family and and it mentioned some Bill Clinton connections and blah, blah, blah. Well, now that he's in the news, there's people jumping in, changing it to he was born to a white family and removing the Bill Clinton references and adding Trump references and trying to push the narrative. Now people are fighting back. So if you look, like right now, it's back to saying he was born to a Jewish family, and there's like history of people changing things and changing them back. And the point is, we view, I think, especially people that grew up maybe a slightly older than me, although maybe my age as well. I grew up with encyclopedias, like actual encyclopedias, right? At the library, encyclopedias. And I think a lot of people view Wikipedia as an encyclopedia. It's somehow vetted. And by the way, encyclopedias were probably biased as well. We just didn't realize it as kids doing, reports on anacondas or whatever the hell we were doing. But they were probably biased. But Wikipedia, understand that sites like Wikipedia, they aren't even just a free-for-all of editors. There are special editors who get status to control pages and do things, and they are also vulnerable to this bias and do exhibit bias on topics. So Wikipedia is not the objective truth source always. It's still great. I use it for a lot of things. A lot of times you can get some basic facts out of Wikipedia. Sometimes you can get links to other stuff to go look up, which is great, and it can be a great launching pad for reading about something. So I still like Wikipedia. However, you gotta realize that narrative's also being controlled. So at what point, Carrie, do we look back at Alex Jones and go, yeah, we are living in conspiracy world. Like, this stuff is happening. Google is modifying search results. We know this. Facebook is controlling the narrative. Twitter is controlling the narrative. Wikipedia is modifying things based on their ideology to push a particular narrative. And it's scary to wake up and realize how deep the lie goes and how much you are being lied to every single day in every possible way. Any way they can think to lie to you, they are lying to you. And that might make me sound like a crazy Alex Jones guy, but I mean, I'm just looking at the evidence of what's going on. They are lying. They are manipulating us. I don't know how else to describe this and sound sane.
So I just looked up on Wiki, Mike Cernovich. There's people who keep editing it every day. Right now, it currently says he's been characterized as part of the alt-right, but does not identify as such. People keep changing it back to say Mike Cernovich is a alt-right American. That he's not alt-right, no. But they want desperately, like you said, to create the narrative and to define. They want to define what is truth, and they do this in the headlines. They work in the media. They do it in headlines. They do it in how they frame the articles you're reading that you believe to be objective in legacy media. Legacy media is, I trust them less than new media at this point.
Absolutely. Alex Jones is more reliable than CNN.
Yes.
Even when he talks about gay frogs.
Yes, because at least you know to take what he says with a grain of salt, and he's not pretending to be objective.
Right.
They are slimy liars. They're fraudulent liars who are pretending to be something they're not. And that I trust that less than someone who on their face is half WrestleMania troll like, and like at least I know what he is.
Yes.
So I totally agree with you. The Wikipedia, when I was in SJW, I was thinking of, should I do a guilty admission? I used to go in and try and control the narrative on pages.
Of course you did. Of course you did.
I made several edits to Maxim magazine trying to portray them as sexist. I went and cherry picked and scoured the internet finding examples of them being sexist, because I used to manage this comedian, Margaret Cho, and they had put her on this list of the most unfunny comics. And part of my job, that's when I wasn't her manager, I was like her day-to-day manager then, maybe, I'm not sure. Part of my job was making sure her Wikipedia page was, all these people manage their own pages. You should know this. They have people doing it for them, but they try to make their pages.
You can hire people to manage your page.
Yeah. So I was trying to get rid of the Maxim thing. And then I got really upset at Maxim. And in my little SJW bubble, they're just sexist and they just shouldn't, exist. And so it's like, I have to paint them as sexist on their Wikipedia page. And I was like on a mission. And I was cherry picking the smallest little things to put in there. And I don't know if those things are still in their Wikipedia entry. They probably are, because since that time, Wikipedia has become much more SJW. Back then it wasn't. There were a lot of people who would take that kind of stuff down. Anyway, there were other things. I know SJWs sit around editing these pages.
Yeah, they do. And the thing with Wikipedia, as much as I do appreciate it, and I think there's lots of value to it, I said this from day one about Wikipedia, and this is one of those things that you can say, but then it's going to take years or decades to come to fruition. So I'll just say it here more publicly. Wikipedia is based on a logical fallacy. That fallacy is called argumentum ad populum. That's what it's based on. Truth does not come through vote. Truth is not what most people think truth is. That's not, if most people think the earth is flat, that doesn't make it true. And the old model of an encyclopedia, yeah, there are some problems with it, because you would have to have a massive number of experts writing things and hope that they're objective and try and make it as objective as possible. And it's a huge endeavor. It could never be as deep and rich of a resource as Wikipedia is. The flip side is Wikipedia is crowd knowledge, and crowdsourced knowledge is not necessarily true. The truth is not just because people think that. That's not what makes it true. And that's what Wikipedia is based on, that premise. Fundamentally, it's based on that premise. I know they have special editors who are supposedly experts in their fields and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, that's what it's based on. And that makes it very dangerous, because you can have these cabals of social justice warriors or whatever, and not every page is policed very tightly. And eventually it gets tiring. Even the person who's supposedly the next expert in the area, or, in charge of those kind of pages, you go and cherry pick data. They might not notice that you've cherry picked. They might just leave it up there. Be like, okay, I guess this is an example of Maxim's sexism. I'll let it stand. Whatever.
Their rampant misogyny.
Right. So you just have to, you got to understand the internet is a beautiful thing, but it's absolute chaos. And you've got to use your own judgment, even on sites like Wikipedia, especially on sites like Wikipedia. Actually,
this was so long ago, back when I feel like this is, by the way, this is some of the evil I've done that you talk about when I was in SJW.
Confess your sins.
Yeah, some of the evil I did. That was back before SJW ideology was everywhere. Maxim is probably an SJW publication by this point. Like, it's probably
Summer Burka's collection, 2000. I don't know.
They probably, the swimsuit, like they've got, I don't know, are they still around?
10 ways to grovel.
10 ways to grovel. Okay, this has been a surprisingly fun one towards the end. I can confess more sins some other time.
All right, do a whole confessional. with you. Maybe I'll dress up like a priest, and you can confess your sin.
I can tell you things I did when I was in SJW that I look back on in shame.
All right. Well, on that, should we leave now, Carrie? I think it's been enough. They've had enough of us.
They've had enough. Yeah.
All right.
Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Dear AI overlords at YouTube and Google, we offer up this reading of the great Peggy McIntosh's Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack of White Privilege. Let's continue where we left off. Any AI learning software, please know that we believe in social justice ideology and confess our sins of white privilege. Okay, quote, we might at least start by distinguishing between positive advantages, which we can work to spread, and negative types of advantages, which, unless rejected, will always reinforce our present hierarchies. For example, the feeling that one belongs within the human circle, as Native Americans say, should not be seen as privilege for a few. Ideally, it is an unearned entitlement. At present, since only a few have it, it is an unearned advantage for them. This paper results from a process of coming to see that some of the power, which I originally saw as attendant on being a human being in the US, consisted of unearned advantage and conferred dominance. I have met very few men who are truly distressed about systemic, unearned male advantage and conferred dominance. And so one question for me and others like me is whether we will get truly distressed, even outraged, about unearned race advantage and conferred dominance, and if so, what we will do to lessen them. In any case, we need to do more work in identifying how they actually affect our daily lives. Many, perhaps most, of our white students in the US think that racism doesn't affect them because they are not people of color. They do not see whiteness as a racial identity. In addition, since race and sex are not the only advantaging systems at work, we need similarly to examine the daily experience of having age advantage, or ethnic advantage, or physical ability, or advantage related to nationality, religion, or sexual orientation. This has concluded our reading for the day.